Welcome, wanderer of the night, to another voyage through the veiled corridors of history. Tonight, let the soft rhythm of your breath carry you into a world where mysticism, alchemy, and forbidden promise entwine. We unravel the tale of the Order of the Golden Dawn, secret heirs of Solomon's wisdom, alchemists who sought not gold but eternal youth. What truths lay hidden in their rituals? What shadows in their symbols? Breathe deeply. Let your eyelids grow heavy, and together we shall uncover the whispers of alchemy and immortality. In this journey through history for sleep, close your eyes, dear traveler of the night, and let us drift to the fog-veiled streets of Victorian London. The year is 1887. Gas lamps flicker on cobblestone corners, their glow softened by the mist that rolls in from the Thames. Amid the clatter of carriages and the hushed chatter of the metropolis, something stirs. Not in Parliament, nor in the bustling markets, but in the shadows of rented halls and candlelit chambers. Here, behind locked doors, a new brotherhood whispers its first invocations, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. This was no ordinary society. London had long been a city of clubs and circles, where gentlemen debated politics, art, and science. But the Golden Dawn was different. Its members gathered not to drink port or discuss empire, but to pierce the veil of existence itself. They believed the world was layered, physical, spiritual, celestial, and that ancient wisdom could unlock hidden powers. With robes, symbols, and arcane rituals, they sought a path that blended science and sorcery, reason and revelation. The founders were themselves men of contradictions. William Wynne Westcott, a coroner by trade, deciphered cryptic manuscripts said to descend from European Rosicrucians. Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers, fiery and eccentric, pored over texts of Kabbalah, alchemy, and astrology. Together they claimed to resurrect a lineage of mystical wisdom, stretching back to the temples of Solomon, the writings of Hermes Trismegistus, and the shadowed laboratories of medieval alchemists. The Golden Dawn was, in their eyes, not an invention, but a continuation, a rebirth of ancient light in a modern age of fog. Why Solomon? Because in him they found the archetype of a king who was more than king, a sage, an alchemist, a master of divine secrets. The biblical accounts of Solomon's temple, his command of spirits, his seal said to bind angels and demons, offered fertile ground for myth. If Solomon had unlocked mysteries of creation, then the Golden Dawn aspired to follow his path. They styled themselves not as experimenters fumbling in laboratories, but as heirs of the Magus King, guardians of the wisdom that could transform men into something more. The age was ripe for such a vision. Victorian society brimmed with paradox. Science was unlocking the atom, mapping the heavens, dissecting the human body. And yet, beneath the surface, fascination with spiritualism surged. Seances, ghostly photography, table rapping. The public longed for proof of another realm. The Golden Dawn stood at this crossroads, offering something far more sophisticated than parlor tricks. Their rituals promised initiation into cosmic mysteries, access to angelic hierarchies, and perhaps even the elixirs of youth sought by alchemists since time immemorial. Those first meetings were shrouded in secrecy. Members donned colored robes, each hue reflecting a stage of progress. Swords were raised, candles lit, sacred names invoked. Charts of the zodiac lined the walls. Hebrew letters glowed in golden ink. At the center stood the initiate, blindfolded, led through a ritual journey of light and shadow, a symbolic death and rebirth, echoing the cycles of sun and moon. For them, initiation was not performance, but transformation. To join the Golden Dawn was to step into a cosmic drama. The society attracted poets, dreamers, and seekers. Among them was a young Irish writer named William Butler Yeats, who would one day win the Nobel Prize in Literature. To Yeats, the Golden Dawn was more than ritual. It was inspiration, a fountain of imagery and myth that would shape his verse. Others, like Florence Farr and Moina Mathers, embraced the order as a rare space where women could ascend alongside men, holding equal rank in mysteries that transcended ordinary hierarchies. Yet even in these early years, whispers spread. Some said the Golden Dawn's rituals were too close to forbidden magic. Others accused them of chasing illusions, of losing themselves in smoke and symbol. But to those within, the order was radiant with promise. They were, after all, the Order of the Golden Dawn, a name chosen deliberately, signifying light breaking through darkness, wisdom illuminating ignorance, eternity shimmering on the horizon. And so, in the quiet fog of London nights, the Golden Dawn was born. A society cloaked in robes and secrecy, seeking Solomon's wisdom, chasing alchemy's eternal promise. Its members believed they were not playing at mysticism, but touching the hem of eternity itself. Whether true or not, one thing is certain. Their dawn, once lit, would cast shadows and brilliance far beyond their age. To understand the allure of the Golden Dawn, one must first understand the shadow they stood beneath, the immense figure of King Solomon. In scripture and legend alike, Solomon was not merely a monarch of Israel, but a man of unfathomable wisdom, a keeper of divine secrets, a ruler who spoke with spirits and commanded the forces of creation. His temple was said to be not only a house of worship, but a cosmic diagram, a structure that mirrored heaven on earth. For those who came centuries later, his name became shorthand for mystical authority. The Golden Dawn saw themselves as inheritors of this tradition. To them, Solomon was not distant history, but a symbol of what was possible. His command of the ineffable, through the seal of Solomon, the ring said to bind demons and angels, or the mysterious texts attributed to him, made him a prototype of the magician scholar. He was the archetype of the alchemist who sought not crude gold, but transformation itself, eternal wisdom, eternal life. Victorian seekers, restless in an age of industrial progress, turned to such legends for meaning. Where machines dissected nature into parts, the Golden Dawn longed for the whole. In Solomon, they saw a unifying figure, a king who was warrior and mystic, judge and alchemist, architect and seer. They imagined that through his temple and his hidden texts flowed the same wisdom sought by Kabbalists, Rosicrucians, and medieval alchemists. To study Solomon was to touch a current older than Christianity, older even than empire, a current that promised eternal youth of the soul. Their rituals reflected this belief. Diagrams of the Tree of Life from Jewish Kabbalah became central to their teachings, each sphere linked to planets, angels, and divine forces. Solomon's name was invoked as the great architect whose temple mirrored that cosmic tree. In initiations, members were told they walked the same path of ascent Solomon had once walked, climbing step by step toward divine understanding. His wisdom was their inheritance, and their order, they claimed, was the vessel through which it survived. Symbols abounded. The hexagram, known in esoteric circles as the Seal of Solomon, was everywhere in their rites. Drawn in golden ink, traced in the air with swords, inscribed in the imagination of the initiate. For them, it was more than a star. It was the union of opposites, heaven meeting earth, fire entwined with water. To contemplate it was to glimpse eternity, to taste the promise of immortality. The very geometry of Solomon's seal became a map of the eternal youth they craved. And then there was alchemy. The Golden Dawn did not see alchemy as the crude pursuit of turning lead into gold. They saw it as a metaphor, a process of transmutation, not of metals, but of souls. Just as Solomon transformed Jerusalem with his temple, they sought to transform themselves with ritual. The elixir of life was not a vial of liquid, but the awakening of divine spark within the self. Eternal youth, for them, was not wrinkleless flesh, but a spirit that would never wither. Still, whispers persisted that some among them took the legends literally, that experiments with tinctures, herbs, and chemical elixirs were undertaken in hidden chambers. Whether fact or rumor, such tales only deepened the mystique. To be associated with Solomon's alchemy was to stand at the threshold of forbidden knowledge. The public might laugh, the church might condemn, but behind closed doors, initiates believed they were heirs to a king who had spoken with angels. This conviction made the Golden Dawn more than a Victorian curiosity. It gave them gravity, a sense of destiny. To join the fire, order was to step into a lineage stretching back to the wisest king of Israel, to participate in the survival of a tradition too sacred for ordinary history. They were not play acting with robes and symbols. They were continuing Solomon's work, guardians of a secret flame. And so, the Golden Dawn grew, not merely as a society of occultists, but as an imagined temple itself, standing where Solomon's temple once stood, between heaven and earth, light and shadow, wisdom and mystery. The dawn they sought was golden because it was eternal, a light that never dimmed, a youth that never died. Let us journey further back, dear traveller, leaving behind Victorian London and stepping into the heat and dust of the ancient Near East. The year is around 970 BCE, and a young king named Solomon has just ascended the throne of Israel. He is remembered in scripture as the son of David, chosen by God not for his strength, but for his wisdom. Yet to those who told his story across centuries, Solomon was far more than a ruler of men. He was a magus king, a sovereign whose authority reached beyond politics into the very mysteries of the cosmos. The Bible tells us Solomon prayed not for wealth or victory, but for understanding. An understanding heart to judge thy people. And God, pleased by this humility, granted him not only wisdom, but riches and honor beyond compare. But legends grew beyond scripture. In Jewish mysticism, in Arabic tales, and in medieval grimoires, Solomon became a figure of awe, commanding angels and demons, speaking the hidden language of creation, and unlocking secrets guarded by the heavens. Central to these tales is the seal of Solomon, a ring said to bear a star, sometimes six-pointed, sometimes five, that gave him dominion over spiritual beings. With it, he could summon spirits of air and earth, bending them to his will. In Islamic tradition, this ring allowed him to command the jinn, building palaces and temples with their labor. In mystical lore, the seal was no ornament but a key, a symbol of harmony, uniting opposites, a geometry that mirrored the very balance of the universe. Then came his temple, described in painstaking detail in the books of Kings and Chronicles. It was not just a building, but a microcosm of creation. Cedar from Lebanon, gold from Ophir, stones cut with supernatural precision. Its pillars, Jachin and Boaz stood as symbols of strength and stability, while its inner sanctum, the Holy of Holies, housed the Ark of the Covenant. To believers, it was the dwelling place of God. To mystics, it was an architectural code, a design that reflected divine geometry. Some even said its very dimensions held the secrets of immortality, encoded in numbers and ratios. From this vision, Solomon became more than a king. He became the archetype of the alchemist, not a medieval man with furnaces and flasks, but a seeker of transformation. He sought to turn not base metal into gold, but ignorance into wisdom, mortality into eternity. Later alchemists would claim that their art descended from his teachings. To them, Solomon's ring was not only a seal of power, but the philosopher's stone itself, the symbol of unending youth and divine union. Legends expanded across cultures. In the Testament of Solomon, a text of uncertain origin, the king describes summoning demons to aid in building the temple, binding them with divine names and sigils. Each spirit, he claimed, revealed secrets of the stars, herbs, and metals, fragments of hidden knowledge. In Arabic tales, he appears as Suleiman, prophet and magician, ruler of men and jinn alike, a figure of divine authority whose wisdom defied death itself. The Golden Dawn, centuries later, would seize upon these legends. To them, Solomon was the exemplar of what they sought: mastery of hidden forces, wisdom that transcended time, the possibility of eternal youth of the soul. His temple became their blueprint, his seal their symbol, his name their invocation. In every ritual they performed, Solomon hovered like a shadowed guide, reminding them that true kingship lay not in crowns, but in secrets. Secrets written in geometry, in starlight, and in the alchemy of transformation. And so, Solomon stands before us not only as a figure of faith, but as a bridge. He bridges history and myth, scripture and sorcery, mortality and eternity. To the faithful, he was God's chosen king. To the mystics, he was a magician of divine sanction. To the Golden Dawn, he was the ancestor of their order, the first great alchemist whose wisdom promised eternal youth. His throne was of gold, but his true crown was knowledge. Knowledge that never grows old, that survives across centuries like an undying flame. Breathe deeply now, traveler of the night, and picture Jerusalem in its golden age. The air hums with the rhythm of chisels striking stone, of cedar beams creaking into place, of priests chanting as the Temple of Solomon rises. To some, this was a house of prayer. To others, it was a vault of divine presence. But to those who looked deeper, mystics, alchemists, and secret societies across centuries, it was nothing less than an architectural cipher, a living alchemical text written in wood, stone, and gold. The biblical books describe its dimensions with precision: 60 cubits long, 20 wide, 30 high. Ratios echo through these numbers like the heartbeat of sacred geometry. The vestibule, the main hall, the inner sanctuary, each chamber aligned not only for worship, but for resonance with cosmic order. The twin pillars, Jachin and Boaz, flanked the entrance, more than stone columns. They were symbols of polarity, strength and stability, masculine and feminine, sun and moon. Their very names became mantras for later alchemists, who saw in them the eternal dance of opposites, the balance that yields transformation. Step into the Holy of Holies, that perfect cube, 20 cubits on each side. To the faithful, it was the dwelling of God's presence, where the Ark of the Covenant rested. To esoteric thinkers, it was a geometric revelation. The cube, symbol of earth and matter, yet also of perfection. In Kabbalistic thought, such a chamber mirrored the spiritual universe. Its proportions whispered of divine harmony. To contemplate them was to glimpse the structure of reality itself. Could this chamber have been designed not only for worship, but as an alchemical crucible, a space where the mortal touched the eternal? The materials themselves spoke a language of symbolism. Cedar of Lebanon, chosen for its incorruptibility, became a metaphor for eternal youth. Gold, the incorruptible metal, was laid thick upon the walls, not only to dazzle the eyes, but to echo the alchemist's pursuit of spiritual gold, the perfection of the soul. Stone, cut without the sound of iron tools, suggested transformation beyond human force, as if the temple was shaped by divine will, echoing the alchemical dream of effortless transmutation. Legends claimed that Solomon built the temple with the aid of supernatural forces. Some said angels guided the measurements. Others, that jinn carried the stones. In alchemical imagination, this meant the temple was infused with knowledge, not of man alone, but of heaven and earth combined. To walk within it was to enter a diagram of creation, a map of the cosmos. The temple became a kind of philosopher's stone made manifest, an architecture that promised transformation to those who could read its code. Medieval mystics seized on this vision. To Kabbalists, the temple was a mirror of the tree of life, each chamber aligned with Sephiroth, each dimension a path toward divine union. To Rosicrucians, it was proof that Solomon held the secrets of transmutation, of eternal wisdom hidden in proportions and light. Even architects of Gothic cathedrals whispered that their soaring spires echoed Solomon's design, translating his blueprint into Christian stone. The Golden Dawn, centuries later, absorbed this heritage with fervor. Their lodges were not haphazard halls, but patterned after temples, with altars aligned, pillars raised, and initiations staged as symbolic entries into the Holy of Holies. They spoke of their order as a restoration of Solomon's temple, not of stone, but of spirit. Each initiate became a temple in miniature, their body the cube, their soul the ark, their enlightenment the hidden flame. Alchemy, in this sense, was not about metals, but about rebuilding the temple within. And so, the temple, long reduced to ruins in history, never truly fell. Its blueprint endured in symbols, in secret orders, in the imagination of seekers who longed for eternity. In every age, it was reinterpreted as house of God, as cosmic map, as alchemical workshop. For the Golden Dawn, it was both all and more, the very key to eternal youth. A design that promised not only to house the divine, but to make man divine. Thus, Solomon's temple was no mere structure. It was a living symbol, a cipher that encoded the mysteries of transformation. Its gold did not tarnish, its cedar did not rot, its proportions did not fade, because in the minds of mystics, it became immortal. It was the eternal temple of the alchemist's dream, the promise that within matter lies the spark of eternity, waiting only to be unveiled. Now, dear traveler, let us wander into the dim-lit chambers of alchemists' workshops, where brass instruments gleamed by candlelight, where glass vials shimmered with mysterious liquids, and where seekers of truth labored over furnaces in search of a miracle. The pursuit was always the same: transformation. Metals into gold, decay into renewal, and perhaps most tantalizing of all, mortality into immortality. Yet for the Golden Dawn, alchemy was not a crude obsession with wealth, but a grander, subtler vision. the transformation of the self into a vessel of eternal youth. The alchemical quest for the philosopher's stone had long been a symbol of this search. To the uninitiated, it was a mythical substance capable of turning lead into gold. To the initiated, it was far more profound, a metaphor for inner perfection, the refinement of base human nature into spiritual brilliance. The Golden Dawn embraced this deeper interpretation. To them, the true gold was not in vaults, but in souls, and the philosopher's stone was no mineral, but a state of consciousness. Their texts and rituals wove alchemy with Kabbalah, astrology, and the myths of Solomon. They imagined the alchemist's journey as a mirror of the initiate's path, beginning in darkness, confronting shadow, and passing through trial until reaching illumination. Just as metals were said to pass through stages, blackening, whitening, reddening, so too did the soul pass through death, purification, and rebirth. In the dim glow of their temple lodges, initiates were guided through these stages with symbols, chants, and invocations, each step echoing the alchemical furnace where transformation took place. For them, eternal youth was not merely a body that did not wrinkle, but a spirit that did not fade. They believed that by awakening divine light within, the soul could stand outside the decay of time. To live in harmony with cosmic order, to embody the wisdom of Solomon, was to taste immortality, even if flesh eventually withered. Yet still, stories circulated that some among them sought more literal results. Tinctures brewed, elixirs mixed, whispers of experiments meant to renew the body itself. Whether rumor or truth, such tales only deepened the aura of forbidden promise. The symbols of alchemy fascinated them. Mercury, fluid and shifting, symbolized the mind's capacity to change. Sulfur, fiery and volatile, represented passion and spirit. Salt, solid and enduring, stood for the body. Together, these elements mapped not only chemistry, but the human being itself. And their unification in alchemical allegory was the key to perfection. For the Golden Dawn, the fusion of these principles was not performed in crucibles, but in ritual, where mind, spirit, and body were harmonized through sacred words and gestures. The influence of Solomon returned here too. His temple was seen as the greatest alchemical work of all, a structure where gold, stone, and cedar blended into a dwelling for the divine. Just as the temple transmuted raw matter into sacred space, so too could the initiate's soul be transmuted into an immortal temple of light. To the Golden Dawn, this was the philosopher's stone reimagined. Not a substance, but a state. Not an object, but an awakening. Still, one cannot ignore the human yearning that pulsed beneath these lofty visions. Eternal youth, whether of soul or body, speaks to a fear as old as humanity. The fear of death, of time's relentless march. The Golden Dawn wrapped this fear in symbols and sacred geometry, in robes and ceremonies. Yet at its heart lay the same desire that drove alchemists in smoky workshops and kings in their gilded halls. The longing to endure, to outlast the shadows. And so, within the Golden Dawn's philosophy, alchemy was reborn. No longer the pursuit of hidden metals, but the pursuit of hidden light. No longer the dream of gold, but the dream of eternity. Their promise was not riches, but transformation. And perhaps, just perhaps, a youth that never fades. Close your eyes, wanderer, and imagine yourself within a candlelit chamber of the Golden Dawn. Heavy curtains shut out the clamor of London streets. The air is scented with incense, curling smoke rising like whispers toward the ceiling. At the center stands an altar draped in black and gold. Upon it inscribed symbols of sun, moon, and star. Around the circle, figures in colored robes move with solemn precision. Their gestures, their words, their silence, all are choreographed to echo the eternal dance of alchemy. For the Golden Dawn, ritual was the furnace where transformation occurred. While medieval alchemists heated metals in crucibles, these initiates believed the true crucible was the soul itself. Their rites were stages of purification, death, and rebirth. To pass through them was to shed the dross of mortality and awaken to a higher life, what they called immortal youth of spirit. The journey began in darkness. An initiate would enter blindfolded, symbolizing ignorance and the base state of lead. Guided by fellow members, they would stumble toward the altar, feeling the weight of shadow. Words of scripture and mysticism were spoken, invoking Solomon, Hermes, and the angelic hierarchies. At the moment of unveiling, the blindfold was lifted, and the initiate was bathed in golden light, a ritual mirror of the alchemical whitening, the first glimpse of inner purity. But the process did not end there. Further rituals carried them deeper into the labyrinth of transformation. The invocation of the elements aligned body and spirit with earth, air, fire, and water, the four foundations of creation. Each element represented not only nature, but stages of self, grounding, breath, passion, and cleansing. To master them was to bring the mortal into balance with the eternal. Perhaps the most striking ceremonies were those that invoked the imagery of death and resurrection. The initiate would symbolically die, lying still as chants of the underworld resounded, only to be raised again in light. This echoed not only Christ's resurrection, but the alchemical reddening, the stage where new life, radiant and perfected, emerges from the ashes of dissolution. For the Golden Dawn, this was more than theater. It was the soul's rehearsal for eternity. Solomon's influence infused these rites. His temple, they believed, was not merely an ancient ruin, but a symbolic pattern. The altar echoed the Holy of Holies. The twin pillars, Jachin and Boaz, stood in their chambers as markers of transformation. Every movement of the ritual was said to reconstruct Solomon's blueprint, not in stone, but in human spirit. Just as the temple was designed to house divine presence, so too were the initiates reshaped to house eternal light. Whispers persisted that some rituals went further, hinting at literal immortality. Tinctures brewed in secrecy, elixirs consumed at midnight, chants said to halt decay. Whether myth or truth, these rumors only heightened the order's mystique. Outsiders accused them of sorcery. Insiders spoke of mysteries too sacred for common ears. Yet even if the elixir was metaphor, its promise was intoxicating. The dream of youth, renewed in every cycle of ritual. The Golden Dawn taught that each initiation was not an end, but a step, just as alchemy itself was a process of stages. The initiate rose through grades, neophyte, adept, magus, each a rung on the ladder toward eternal dawn. To climb was to transmute the self, leaving behind mortality's shadow for a brilliance untarnished by age. In this way, ritual became the philosopher's stone itself. It was not hidden in a vial or buried in Solomon's vaults. It was enacted in robes and chants, in symbols and silence. It was the art of transformation, written in human action, a dance of light and shadow that promised to reshape the soul. And so, the Golden Dawn's rituals offered not merely comfort, but a promise that time's decay could be transcended, that within the mortal shell lay a spark untouched by age, waiting to be kindled. To walk their path was to believe that immortality was not only possible, but inevitable for those who embrace the eternal dawn. Picture now, traveler, the hidden halls of the golden dawn, not vast cathedrals open to the faithful, but modest rooms transformed into temples by symbol and secrecy. From the outside, these spaces might have looked ordinary. A rented hall in London, a quiet house in Paris, a discreet chamber above a shop. Yet once the doors closed, curtains drawn, and candles lit, these rooms became microcosms of Solomon's temple, sanctuaries where the drama of initiation unfolded. The architecture of the Golden Dawn's lodges was deliberate. At the entrance, 2 pillars always stood, one black, one white, evoking Jachin and Boaz, the legendary columns of Solomon's temple. They were not mere decorations, but gateways, reminders that a step between them was to cross from the mundane into the sacred. To pass them was to leave behind the ordinary world of clocks and commerce and enter the timeless sphere of ritual, where shadows whispered of eternity. Within, the altar occupied the center. Draped in black and gold, it symbolized both the material and the divine, the earth and the heavens. Upon it lay implements of ritual, the sword of air, the cup of water, the wand of fire, the pentacle of earth. Each tool corresponded to elemental forces. Each gesture mirrored the balance of creation. Around the altar, candles glowed, their flames representing both the soul's light and the eternal fire of transformation. The arrangement of the room itself was coded with meaning. The east, where the sun rose, symbolized illumination and initiation. The west, the setting sun, death and endings. The initiate, blindfolded and trembling, would begin in the west, representing ignorance, and journey toward the east, where the blindfold was lifted to reveal light. In this way, every initiation echoed the cycle of alchemy, from darkness to illumination, from death to rebirth. Members wore robes of distinct colors, each marking their grade in the order. The neophyte's robe was plain, symbolizing the beginning of transformation. Adepts wore richer hues, red, gold, and deep blue, reflecting mastery of elements and steps closer to divine light. The leaders, called hierophants, often wore brilliant white or crimson, embodying the eternal flame of wisdom. To outsiders, these garments might have seemed theatrical, but to initiates, they were living symbols, each thread a reminder of their spiritual ascent. The rituals themselves unfolded like sacred theater. The initiate would be led blindfolded around the temple, halting at each station where elemental guardians questioned them. A sword's point might press against their chest, reminding them of courage. A cup might touch their lips, symbolizing purification. Each object was not literal, but symbolic. Each action a step in the journey of transformation. To endure the trial was to prove oneself ready to step into greater mysteries. But the true power of these initiations lay in their secrecy. Knowledge of the order's inner rituals was withheld until each stage was earned. Words of power, names of angels, diagrams of stars, all were revealed only when the initiate had proved worthy. This secrecy created a sense of gravity, of belonging to something greater than oneself. To be entrusted with hidden knowledge was to feel reborn, to believe that one now walked the same path as Solomon, Hermes, and the alchemists of ages past. Whispers said the lodges were more than symbolic. Some believed they were engines of transformation, constructed with proportions that echoed Solomon's temple, infused with energy through ritual repetition. In this belief, the very walls absorbed the chance of movements, becoming charged with unseen force. Entering such a space was said to quicken the soul, to stir the spark of eternity within. Thus, the Golden Dawn's temples were not places of worship in the conventional sense. They were laboratories of the spirit, crucibles where men and women sought to refine themselves. They mirrored Solomon's temple not in grandeur, but in purpose, to house the divine, to make the mortal eternal. And so, in the quiet heart of London's fog, amid unassuming buildings and rented halls, the Golden Dawn built their secret temples. To the world outside, they were lawyers, doctors, poets. But within these chambers, they were seekers of eternal youth, heirs of Solomon's alchemy, guardians of rituals meant to outlast the decay of flesh. Now, traveler, let us step closer to the heart of the Golden Dawn's mystery, the initiations themselves. Imagine the room aglow with flickering candles, shadows dancing on painted symbols. A low chant hums through the air, vibrating in rhythm with the heartbeat of the initiate. Cloaked figures form a circle, their faces obscured by hoods, their voices blending in a language that feels older than stone. This was no performance for spectacle. It was sacred drama, crafted to guide the soul across thresholds of transformation. The journey began with blindness. The initiate, eyes veiled by cloth, stood in darkness, cut off from the visible world. This blindness was symbolic. Ignorance, the raw state of humanity before awakening. Guided by guardians of the elements, the initiate was led through stations representing earth, air, fire, and water. At each station came a challenge, a sword's cold edge against the chest, a reminder of mortality, a flame held close to the skin, the fire of purification, drops of water brushed across lips, the cleansing of spirit. Each gesture struck deep into the psyche, stirring the sense that one was passing through realms beyond the physical. Then came the confrontation with death. In some rites, the initiate lay still, arms folded, as chants invoked the silence of the grave. The room darkened, candles extinguished one by one until only the faintest glimmer remained. In that hush, the initiate heard words of solemnity. You are no longer who you were. What is mortal has fallen away. What is eternal shall rise. When the final candle were rekindled, when the blindfold was lifted, the initiate beheld light as though for the first time. This was rebirth, not of body, but of spirit. Every step mirrored the alchemical process. The darkness was the nigredo, the blackening of lead, the breaking down of the old self. The lifting of the blindfold was the albedo, the whitening where purity dawns. The final embrace of light and symbol was the rubedo, the reddening where transformation completes and gold emerges. Through this drama, the initiate was taught that they themselves were the alchemist's vessel, and that eternal youth lay in this cycle of inner death and renewal. The words spoken during initiation were cloaked in mysticism. Invocations of Solomon echoed through the chamber. The seal of Solomon traced in the air with a sword. The name of the Magus king whispered as if to summon his presence. The pillars of the temple were invoked as eternal guardians, standing not only at the entrance of Solomon's temple, but at the threshold of every soul. To pass between them was to step into the mystery of eternity. What gave these ceremonies their power was not merely the symbolism, but the secrecy. Outside these halls, life carried on with the banality of Victorian society. Inside, the initiate experienced a drama that felt eternal, a reenactment of cosmic truths whispered since the dawn of time. Secrecy amplified the effect. The sense of being chosen, of receiving knowledge not meant for all eyes, created a transformation as real as any substance could offer. Some whispered that hidden within the rites were fragments of older mysteries, rituals borrowed from Rosicrucians, Freemasons, even echoes of ancient Egyptian ceremonies. Others claimed that in the moment of rebirth, initiates glimpsed visions, bursts of light, dreams of eternity, voices from beyond. Whether imagination or reality, the experiences bound them tighter to the order, convincing them that eternal youth of the soul was not just a promise, but a presence felt in the marrow. Thus, initiation in the Golden Dawn was not only passage into a society, it was entry into a new life, a rebirth into a lineage of mystics, alchemists, and seekers. To walk away from that altar was to walk as one changed, a fragment of Solomon's wisdom rekindled, a spark of eternity lit within the fragile vessel of flesh. And so, initiation was the crown of their temples, a living alchemical act where ritual transmuted fear into faith, ignorance into light, mortality into a whisper of immortality. Drift now, weary traveler, into the realm of whispered potions and secret experiments, the place where myth and medicine blur, where seekers of eternity stir their brews beneath the dim light of flickering lamps. The Golden Dawn, for all its lofty talk of spiritual immortality, could not escape humanity's oldest longing, the dream of eternal youth. And so, in the hushed chambers of their order, stories emerged of alchemists chasing the elixir of life. The pursuit of such an elixir was no invention of the Victorians. From China's Taoist sages to the Arab philosophers of the Islamic Golden Age, seekers across cultures searched for a substance that could banish decay and prolong existence. Legends told of powders that granted immortality, of fountains that restored youth, of stones that transformed the frail into the unaging. The Golden Dawn inherited this tradition, weaving it into their rituals and texts. To them, eternal youth was not only metaphor but possibility, a prize hidden in the folds of nature, waiting to be unlocked. Whispers spoke of tinctures brewed in secrecy, of herbs mixed with minerals in pursuit of the perfect elixir. Mercury, often feared as poison, was in some accounts believed to hold transformative power when purified. Gold, incorruptible and radiant, was dissolved in alchemical solutions, thought to pass its imperishable quality into the human frame. Some initiates claim to have tasted such concoctions, sipped in solemn ritual, believing themselves transformed in spirit, if not in flesh. But the Golden Dawn was not merely imitating medieval alchemists. They interpreted the elixir through the lens of mysticism. To drink the draught was to enact symbol in substance, to internalize the eternal light they invoked in ritual. Whether or not the liquid altered the body, the act itself altered the soul. In the dim glow of candles, a sip of a golden tincture could feel like communion with eternity, a ritual of youth renewed. Solomon's shadow lingered here as well. Legends claimed he possessed secret texts of healing, manuals of herbs and stones that granted vitality. In Jewish mysticism, Solomon was said to know the names of angels who governed health and longevity. In Arabic tales, Suleiman commanded spirits to reveal the plants of paradise, capable of restoring vigor. The Golden Dawn claimed these traditions as part of their inheritance. To sip an elixir in their lodge was to echo the cup of Solomon himself, tasting what the Magus king once knew. Skeptics, even within the order, warned against literalism. For them, the elixir was allegory, a symbol of awakening, of eternal youth as a state of mind. They argued that no tincture could halt time's march, but that through ritual and wisdom, the soul could step outside decay. Yet the rumors persisted, fueled by human yearning. Perhaps some did believe they had discovered a way to stretch life, to keep skin supple and spirit untarnished. Perhaps others sought only the illusion and found it enough. This tension between symbol and substance gave the legend its power. On one level, eternal youth was metaphor, the soul reborn through alchemy and ritual. On another, it was a tantalizing possibility, whispered in experiments, hinted in manuscripts, dreamed in secret. To the Golden Dawn, both levels mattered. The elixir, whether literal or symbolic, reminded them of the eternal flame that glowed beyond the reach of age. And so, the legends grew. Tales of members who seemed not to age, of poets whose words burned with undimmed fire, of adepts whose eyes glowed as though lit from within. These stories, told in hushed tones, cast the order in a light both alluring and fearful. Were they seekers of wisdom or sorcerers who defied the natural order? Were they heirs of Solomon or pretenders playing with poisons? The line blurred and the mystery deepened. Thus, the Golden Dawn stood at the crossroads of myth and reality. They spoke of eternal youth as spirit, yet whispered of elixirs that might touch flesh. They invoked Solomon as archetype, yet brewed tinctures in London's shadow. Their dream of youth endured not because it was proven, but because it was longed for. And in longing, it became real enough to shape their legend. Now, dear traveler, let us follow the Golden Dawn's imagination beyond the candlelit halls of London into a world of older traditions that whispered of youth unending. For the Order never claimed their knowledge was born anew. They wove together strands of wisdom from distant lands and ancient ages, forging a tapestry of immortality that stretched from Solomon's temple to the mountains of China. From the east came tales of Taoist sages who sought the elixir of immortality in mountain springs and hidden herbs. They spoke of cinnabar, a red mineral transformed into potions said to extend life for centuries. Legends told of emperors who swallowed jade powder to preserve vitality, of monks who vanished into forests, returning decades later with faces unlined and eyes shining. These stories trickled into Europe, where mystics and alchemists reinterpreted them as allegories of spiritual renewal. For the Golden Dawn, they were proof that the yearning for eternal youth was universal and perhaps achievable. From the Arab world came the brilliance of the Islamic Golden Age, where philosophers like Jabir ibn Hayyan explored alchemy as both science and symbol. They spoke of the elixir of life, not only as substance, but as a principle, the balance of elements, the harmony of body and soul. Their experiments with distillation, metals, and minerals shaped medieval European alchemy. The Golden Dawn eagerly absorbed these traditions, blending Arabic alchemical texts with their own mystical frameworks. To sip from a chalice in ritual was to echo centuries of seekers who had sought the same draught of eternity. From Jewish mysticism came the Sefer HaRazim and other ancient texts, filled with angelic names and recipes for healing. Solomon, in these traditions, was said to command spirits who revealed the herbs of paradise, capable of restoring youth. Kabbalists spoke of the tree of life, not only as a cosmic map, but as a fountain of vitality, where the soul could ascend toward renewal. The Golden Dawn embraced these ideas, claiming their initiates walked in Solomon's footsteps, inheriting a wisdom that promised not only immortality of spirit, but echoes of vitality in flesh. Even Christian legends fed into this current. Medieval seekers spoke of the fountain of youth, hidden in distant lands, sought by explorers like Ponce de Leon. Though never found, its myth persisted, suggesting that somewhere in the world flowed waters capable of washing away age. The Golden Dawn did not dismiss such tales as folly. They saw them as symbols of a deeper truth, that eternal youth was both an inner state and a cosmic possibility. In the lodges of the Golden Dawn, these traditions mingled. Rituals echoed Taoist symbolism of cycles and breath. Alchemical diagrams borrowed from Arabic manuscripts line their texts. Kabbalistic names of angels were chanted beside invocations of Hermes and Solomon. This cross-cultural inheritance gave their search for youth a universal gravitas. They were not lone dreamers, but heirs to humanity's oldest pursuit, to step outside the cage of time. Yet the order also wrestled with a paradox. Were these traditions literal or metaphorical? Did Solomon, Taoist sages, and Arab alchemists truly discover substances that granted immortality, or were their recipes allegories for spiritual awakening? For the Golden Dawn, the answer was both. To them, every ritual, every tincture, every symbol worked on two levels, the body and the soul. Even if no potion could halt wrinkles, the act of seeking shaped the spirit. And in shaping the spirit, one touched eternity. This synthesis gave the Golden Dawn's dream of youth its peculiar force. It was not rooted in a single culture or myth, but in a convergence of many. To their eyes, the promise of eternal youth was not the fantasy of one people, but the echo of humanity itself, whispered across continents and centuries. And in that universality lay its power. Thus, in the quiet chambers of the Golden Dawn, the initiate who raised a chalice of golden liquid was not just reenacting a Victorian rite. They were joining a procession of seekers stretching back to Solomon, to Chinese hermits, to Arab alchemists, to explorers chasing hidden fountains. Each sip was a reminder. The longing for immortality is not folly, but the most human dream of all. And so, through this tapestry of traditions, the Golden Dawn claimed their place as alchemists of youth, not inventors of the quest, but its inheritors, blending cultures into a single chalice, from which they drank both myth and mystery. Rest now, traveler, and listen as the story darkens. For every order that walks in light casts shadows behind it, and the Golden Dawn was no exception. Their pursuit of wisdom, their rituals of transformation, and their whispers of eternal youth did not unfold in peace. With secrecy came suspicion. With ambition came rivalry. And with their claim to Solomon's inheritance came accusations of heresy. From its earliest days, the Golden Dawn faced whispers of danger. Outsiders who caught fragments of their rituals, glimpses of robed figures, chants in foreign tongues, diagrams of stars and sigils, called them sorcerers. To the respectable citizens of London, they seemed too close to forbidden magic. Newspapers mocked them as dabblers in witchcraft, and clergy condemned them for straying from Christian faith. What began as curiosity soon turned to fear. Were these men and women calling down angels, or something far darker? The order's own secrecy only deepened suspicion. Members swore oaths never to reveal the rituals, with dire warnings of spiritual ruin for betrayers. This silence created fertile ground for rumor. It was said their ceremonies invoked demons as well as angels, that their elixirs poisoned minds, that their quest for immortality was an affront to God. Even their use of Solomon's name troubled the faithful. Was it reverence for scripture, or theft of sacred symbols for occult ends? Within the order itself, shadows gathered. Rivalries emerged between leaders who vied for authority. Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers, the fiery mystic who shaped much of the Golden Dawn system, grew increasingly authoritarian. His clashes with William Yates and other members split the order into factions. Accusations flew of manipulation, of fraud, of misuse of spiritual power. What had begun as a fellowship of seekers risked becoming a battlefield of egos cloaked in robes. The allure of forbidden power also tempted some. While many pursued spiritual illumination, whispers claimed others sought literal dominion. Wealth, influence, even control over others through rituals of compulsion. Tales circulated of members experimenting with curses, summoning forces they could not control. Whether truth or slander, such stories stained the Order's reputation. The dream of eternal youth now seemed entwined with darker ambitions. The desire not only to transcend time, but to wield power over life and death. The Golden Dawn's fascination with alchemy and the elixir of life further fueled controversy. To their sympathizers, it was metaphor, an allegory of inner transformation. To their critics, it was hubris, an attempt to play God, to seize what belonged only to the divine. In Christian eyes, the promise of immortality lay in resurrection, not in chalices brewed in secret. To claim otherwise was heresy. To mix Solomon's sacred name with tinctures and talismans was to invite judgment. This tension between light and shadow defined the Golden Dawn story. On one side, they presented themselves as heirs of Solomon's wisdom, seekers of divine harmony. On the other, they were accused of trafficking in sorcery, corrupted by secrecy and ambition. Both images persisted, feeding the legend. For to some, they were pioneers of hidden truth. To others, they were deceivers, cloaking sin in robes of gold. And so, whispers of heresy surrounded them, growing louder with each scandal, each rumor of forbidden ritual. The Golden Dawn could not escape its own contradictions. They were a brotherhood of poets and dreamers, yet also a society of rivals and schemers. They sought eternal youth of the soul, yet some chased literal immortality at perilous cost. Their light dazzled, but their shadows spread. Thus the Order, born as a dawn of golden promise, found itself haunted by twilight, and in those shadows, the seeds of its downfall were sown. The Golden Dawn, traveler, was not undone by outside voices alone. Its greatest trials rose from within, from rivalries that split its members, from betrayals that dragged its secrets into the public eye, and from the weight of its own ambitions. What had begun as a dawn of unity soon fractured into competing suns, each casting conflicting light upon the Order's path. At the center of the storm stood Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers, the Order's most commanding figure. Brilliant, fiery, and uncompromising, Mathers styled himself as the true guardian of Solomon's mysteries. From his pen flowed the rituals that shaped the Order's core. Yet his charisma was matched by a hunger for authority. He demanded loyalty, expecting obedience not only to the rituals, but to himself as their interpreter. For some, he he was a visionary leader. For others, he was a tyrant cloaked in mystical robes. Fractures deepened when respected members like William Butler Yeats, the poet whose pen drew inspiration from Golden Dawn imagery, began to question Mather's authority. Intellectuals within the order chafed at his autocratic ways. They argued that knowledge should be shared, not hoarded, that Solomon's wisdom belonged to all initiates, not one man's interpretation. Factions emerged, those loyal to Mathers and those seeking reform. The unity of the temple cracked like stones struck by lightning. Conflict spilled beyond whispers into open rebellion. In 1900, the infamous Battle of Blythe Road unfolded in London, when rival factions clashed over control of a lodge. Locks were broken, papers seized, accusations hurled. What should have been a sanctuary of ritual became a theater of mundane struggle, exposing the order's weaknesses to the world outside. The cracks widened further when internal documents, once sworn to secrecy, were leaked. Ritual texts, diagrams, and translations appeared in print, stripped of their sacred veil. Outsiders who had once speculated in awe now read the order's secrets in cheap pamphlets. Critics mocked them as plagiarists, noting that much of their material was drawn from older Rosicrucian and Masonic sources. What had been cloaked in mystery was now exposed, and the revelation diminished the order's prestige. Accusations of fraud followed. Some claimed Mathers fabricated connections to secret chiefs. Invisible masters, he insisted, guided the order from higher planes. Believers clung to the idea of hidden mentors. Skeptics saw it as invention to bolster his authority. The tension between faith and doubt grew unbearable. Members left in waves, disillusioned by the gap between the promise of eternal wisdom and the reality of human squabbling. Even the order's pursuit of eternal youth became a target of ridicule. Whispers of elixirs and rituals to defy aging, once alluring, now seemed absurd when contrasted with the aging faces of its leaders. The promise of transmutation looked less like divine science and more like delusion. For critics, the Golden Dawn's dream of immortality was proof not of wisdom, but of folly. Yet even in collapse, the Order's legend endured. Scandal gave it a darker allure. Where once it was a brotherhood of mystics, now it became a society of dangerous secrets, whispered of in the same breath as sorcery and forbidden rites. Its controversies cemented its place in history, not as a forgotten lodge, but as a stage upon which humanity's eternal struggle with ambition and mystery played out. And so the Golden Dawn, fractured and exposed, drifted toward its twilight. Its members scattered, some forming new orders, others retreating into private study. But the shadows of controversy never fully extinguished its flame. Indeed, they made it burn all the brighter in legend, for nothing fuels myth like scandal, and nothing makes seekers lean closer than the promise of knowledge once forbidden. Thus ended the Golden Dawn's golden age, not with triumph, but with fracture, betrayal, and exposure. Yet in its fall, it carved itself into memory, a reminder that even seekers of light are not free from shadow. Settle deeper into the quiet, traveler, and let us turn our gaze back toward the shadows of antiquity. For much of the Golden Dawn's mystique rested not only on rituals of their own design, but on the legends of lost texts attributed to Solomon himself. These manuscripts, if they ever existed, were said to hold the keys to dominion over angels and demons, the secrets of alchemy, and perhaps even the formula for eternal youth. From the earliest centuries, stories abounded that Solomon's wisdom was preserved in secret writings. The Book of Wisdom, the Key of Solomon, the Testament of Solomon, each text, whether canonical, apocryphal, or pseudepigraphal, carried whispers of his power. Some contained instructions for summoning spirits, others for constructing talismans, still others for healing and transformation. Though scholars debated their origins, mystics regarded them as fragments of a greater whole, lost chapters of a library once housed in Solomon's temple. According to medieval legend, when the temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, priests hid its most sacred scrolls in secret chambers beneath the city. Others claimed the texts were carried into exile, guarded by a lineage of sages. In Islamic tradition, Solomon, Sulaiman, was said to possess a Kitab al-Asrar, a book of secrets revealed by God, detailing the forces of nature and the hidden sciences of the stars. To many seekers, these stories were proof that somewhere, perhaps still hidden, lay manuscripts of unfathomable power. The Golden Dawn drew eagerly upon this lore. In their writings and rituals, references to Solomon's texts appeared like constellations, faint but guiding. They invoke the seal of Solomon not merely as a symbol, but as an echo of instructions once written in those lost books. They spoke of the Ark of the Covenant, not only as a relic, but as a possible vessel for scrolls of divine science. For initiates, to study the Golden Dawn's teachings was to imagine themselves leafing through the very manuscripts Solomon may have once held. Some members even speculated that fragments of these texts had survived in hidden corners of Europe, embedded within Rosicrucian treatises, cloaked in Masonic symbolism, scattered in obscure grimoires. The Clavicula Salomonis, a Renaissance grimoire claiming to be Solomon's own manual of magic, was studied with fascination. Its rituals of purification, invocations of angels, and circles of protection became a blueprint for later orders, including the Golden Dawn. Whether authentic or not, its existence seemed to confirm that echoes of Solomon's lost wisdom lingered. Legends persisted too of texts that spoke directly to alchemy and immortality. Some whispered that Solomon had recorded the secret of a living gold, a substance that could renew the body as well as enrich the soul. Others said his knowledge of plants, recorded in 3rd Kings as numbering in the thousands, included herbs of paradise capable of restoring youth. To the Golden Dawn, these legends were not fanciful tales, but symbolic signposts. Even if no physical manuscript could be found, the idea of Solomon's lost library gave their order a sense of lineage, as though their rituals were fragments of a far older book. Critics, of course, scoffed. They pointed out that many so-called Solomonic texts were medieval inventions, stitched together by scribes who sought authority by invoking the king's name. Yet for mystics, the question of authenticity mattered less than the continuity of tradition. Even if written centuries later, these texts bore symbols and formulas that resonated with the eternal search for transformation. To read them was to walk a path lit by Solomon's distant flame. And so, in the imagination of the Golden Dawn, Solomon's lost texts became more than relics. They were archetypes of wisdom, blueprints of alchemy, whispers of eternal youth. Whether buried beneath Jerusalem, scattered through grimoires, or hidden in the folds of their own rituals, these texts reminded the Order that they were part of a story far older than themselves, a story where a king's pen might hold the secret to eternity. Lean closer now, traveler, for within the labyrinth of Solomon's legacy lies the shimmering thread of his most enduring symbols. The Seal of Solomon, the grimoires that bore his name, and the blueprint of eternity that mystics believed they concealed. To the Golden Dawn, these were not relics of forgotten superstition, but keys, fragments of an ancient architecture of knowledge, as relevant in their candlelit halls as they had been in the courts of the Magus king. The Seal of Solomon, often depicted as a six-pointed star, was more than geometry. To mystics, it represented the marriage of opposites, fire and water, heaven and earth, male and female, spirit and matter. Alchemists saw in it the formula of transmutation, the union of contrary forces producing something eternal. For the Golden Dawn, tracing the seal in the air during ritual was a reenactment of Solomon's own power, a way of aligning the initiate with cosmic order. It was not a symbol to be studied, but a sigil to be lived. Linked to the seal were the grimoires of Solomon, those mysterious books that filtered through medieval Europe, each claiming to preserve fragments of his wisdom. Chief among them was the Clavicula Salomonis, the Key of Solomon. Within its pages lay instructions for consecrating tools, invoking angels, and banishing spirits. To scholars, it was a Renaissance compilation of older traditions, but to initiates, it was a surviving echo of Solomon's lost library. The Golden Dawn mined its pages, borrowing rituals, reinterpreting symbols, weaving its formulas into their own tapestry of rites. Another text, the Testament of Solomon, painted an even stranger picture. The king commanding demons to construct his temple, binding them with the power of divine names. Each spirit, he claimed, revealed knowledge of stars, herbs, and secret powers. Though written centuries after Solomon's reign, this tale fascinated the Golden Dawn, who saw in it a mythic allegory of alchemy itself, the transformation of chaos into order, of shadow into light. To them, Solomon was not a sorcerer of demons, but a master of forces hidden in nature, bending even the darkest elements into service of divine architecture. In these symbols and texts, the Golden Dawn discerned what they called a blueprint of eternity. Solomon's temple was not only a historical structure, but a code, its dimensions reflecting cosmic ratios, its chambers mirroring stages of initiation, its pillars embodying balance. The seal was its emblem, the grimoires its commentary, the rituals its reenactment. Together, they formed a map not of stone, but of spirit, a design that promised eternal youth to those who could decode its mysteries. The order taught that to meditate upon the seal was to harmonize inner opposites, to stabilize the soul in a state beyond decay. To study the grimoires was to receive echoes of Solomon's wisdom, passed like whispers through centuries. To participate in their rituals was to walk the corridors of the temple itself, even if it no longer stood in Jerusalem. For the initiate, these practices were not reenactments, but reconstructions of Solomon's lost science, bringing his blueprint to life in the present. Critics dismissed this as delusion. They argued that the grimoires were patchwork creations, stitched together from Christian, Jewish, and pagan sources. The seal, they said, was a medieval symbol, retroactively linked to Solomon, but such objections mattered little to the Golden Dawn. In myth, they found meaning. In symbol, they found transformation. To them, the power of Solomon's legacy was not in historical proof, but in its resonance, the way it stirred the human soul toward eternity. Thus, the seal, the grimoire, and the temple became more than curiosities of antiquity. They became living tools of alchemy, shaping the Golden Dawn's quest for eternal youth. In every hexagram drawn, in every invocation spoken, in every ritual step toward the east, initiates believed they were following Solomon's design. A design that promised that time's shadow could be lifted, that death itself could be transmuted into dawn. And so, the legend of Solomon's lost texts did not remain locked in the past. Through the Golden Dawn, they breathed again, their pages rewritten in ritual, their symbols traced in firelight, their blueprint reconstructed in the hearts of seekers who longed for eternity. Traveler, every dawn must meet its dusk, and so it was with the hermetic order of the Golden Dawn. What began as a shimmering flame of mysticism, alchemy, and poetic vision in late Victorian London eventually fractured under the weight of its own contradictions. In the glow of candlelit ritual, initiates had spoken of eternity, but outside the temple, time pressed heavily upon them. Rivalries, scandals, and disillusionment brought shadows that no ritual could banish. The order had always walked a delicate line between revelation and secrecy. For years, the allure of hidden knowledge sustained its growth. Poets, doctors, and dreamers found in it a sanctuary of imagination, a refuge from the grey mechanization of modern society. Yet secrecy that inspires awe can also breed suspicion. By the close of the 1890s, cracks were already forming in the golden facade. Members whispered of leaders who withheld teachings, of rituals that borrowed too heavily from earlier orders, of ambitions that outpaced wisdom. At the center stood Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers, the fiery architect of many Golden Dawn rituals. To some, he was a visionary, channeling the wisdom of Solomon and Hermes into modern form. To others, he became increasingly authoritarian, demanding obedience and claiming contact with mysterious, secret chiefs, invisible masters said to guide the order. Whether these secret chiefs were real beings, spirits, or inventions of Mather's imagination became a source of bitter dispute. Tensions boiled over with members such as William Butler Yeats, who once found inspiration in the order's ceremonies, but grew wary of Mather's domineering hand. Disagreements over authority led to schisms. Lodges that once worked in harmony now turned against one another, each claiming to be the true inheritor of the Golden Dawn's vision. What had been a circle of seekers became, in places, a theater of ego and rivalry. The public, too, began to pry into the order's secrets. Reports surfaced in newspapers, mocking their elaborate robes and dramatic rituals. Where initiates saw sacred drama, critics saw theater bordering on the absurd. Worse still, internal documents began to leak, exposing the rituals once guarded by oaths of silence. Pamphlets printed their ceremonies in full, stripping them of their aura. Mysteries once veiled in golden secrecy now lay bare on cheap paper, feeding ridicule and disillusionment. For some members, the exposure was devastating. They had believed themselves heirs to Solomon's lost wisdom, guardians of eternal truths. To see their sacred rituals paraded as curiosities made the order's grandeur feel fragile, its light dimmed by mockery. Some left quietly, disenchanted. Others departed noisily, condemning leaders for deception and mismanagement. The Golden Dawn's experiments with alchemy and eternal youth only deepened the controversy. Where once the pursuit of spiritual immortality inspired awe, now it seemed like dangerous folly. Critics outside the order called it heresy. Disillusioned members whispered that promises of eternal youth had been exaggerated, if not fabricated. The elixirs brewed in secret lost their mystique when rival factions accused one another of charlatanry. Thus, the Golden Dawn began to fracture. Some lodges splintered into independent groups, carrying fragments of ritual but severing ties with the central authority. Others faded entirely, leaving behind only memories of candlelit chambers. The grand experiment of reviving Solomon's alchemy in modern form faltered, undone not by outside persecution, but by the frailties of ambition, rivalry, and human pride. Yet even in decline, the order left behind a curious legacy. Its members did not forget the visions they had glimpsed, nor the sense of eternity they had touched in ritual. The Golden Dawn's fall was not the end of its story, but the beginning of its transformation into legend, a legend of brilliance and betrayal, of golden promises tarnished by shadow. So the order that once called itself a dawn slipped into twilight. Its temples grew silent, its members scattered, its name whispered with equal parts awe and scorn. And yet, traveler, as we shall see, even in its fall, the Golden Dawn ensured that its flame, however flickering, would never be fully extinguished. The fall of the Golden Dawn, traveler, was not a single moment of collapse, but a slow fading, a twilight that stretched across years. Where once the order burned brightly, drawing poets, visionaries, and seekers of eternity, it gradually fractured into competing fragments, each claiming the mantle of Solomon's heirs, each weakened by division. Yet in its very twilight, the Golden Dawn was transformed, becoming less an organization and more a legend. By the early 20th century, the schisms were clear. Mathers, entrenched in Paris, insisted that he alone held the authority of the secret chiefs. Others, including members in London, rejected his control, forming breakaway lodges that reinterpreted the rituals. Some sought to purify the order of what they saw as Mather's excesses. Others tried to expand it with new practices. In the process, the Golden Dawn lost its cohesion. What had been one body splintered into many shadows. Yet even in fragmentation, the rituals endured. The initiation ceremonies, the tracing of the Seal of Solomon, the chants of angels and elements. These did not vanish. They lived on in lodges that carried forward pieces of the whole, often under new names. The Stella Matutina and other offshoots kept the flame alive, preserving the teachings in altered forms. In this way, the Golden Dawn's twilight became a scattering of embers, each glowing faintly, never quite extinguished. For the public, however, the order's decline only sharpened its mystique. Newspapers portrayed its rivalries as scandal, but readers could not resist the allure of secret rituals and forbidden knowledge. Tales of members seeking eternal youth, of lodges divided by hidden manuscripts, of leaders claiming communion with unseen masters, all fueled fascination. The order's controversies, once shameful, became part of its legend, ensuring that it would not be forgotten. Some members who departed carried its influence into wider culture. W.B. Yeats, though disillusioned by the conflicts, wove the order's imagery into his poetry. Alchemical metaphors, symbols of rebirth, and visions of light and shadow colored his verse, granting the Golden Dawn a place in the literary canon. Others, like Florence Farr and Dion Fortune, carried fragments of its teachings into theatre, novels, and new mystical societies. Through them, the order lived on in art and imagination. The dream of eternal youth, too, did not perish, though it shifted in meaning. As literal elixirs failed to manifest their promise, members reframed the goal as spiritual immortality, the preservation of the soul beyond death. In this form, the Golden Dawn's alchemy endured, less as potion than as philosophy. To walk the ritual path, to pass through symbolic death and rebirth, was to claim a youth of spirit untarnished by time. This reframing allowed the Order's ideas to survive even after its authority crumbled. In Twilight, the Golden Dawn also became a seedbed for later occult movements. The teachings of Aleister Crowley, though controversial, drew heavily from its structures. Neo-paganism, ceremonial magic, and modern esoteric groups all inherited fragments of its rituals. Even popular culture, novels, films, and music echoed its imagery, reimagining the Golden Dawn as both light and shadow, wisdom and controversy. Its twilight was not extinction, but transformation into a wider mythos. And so, Traveler, the fall of the Golden Dawn, was paradoxical. Outwardly, it seemed a failure. A society broken by rivalry, its secrets exposed, its members scattered. But inwardly, it achieved what many secret orders never could: immortality in imagination. Though its lodges fell silent, its name endured, its rituals echoed, its symbols traced in countless new forms. This, perhaps, was its final alchemy, to transmute its own collapse into continuity, its twilight into legend. The Golden Dawn may have faded, but in fading, it ensured that its light, however fractured, would never truly die. Traveler, though the Golden Dawn fractured and fell into twilight, the flame of alchemy they cherished did not perish. It is a flame that flickers through history, rekindled by seekers in every age, never extinguished by time or controversy. For alchemy is not merely the pursuit of metals or elixirs, but the eternal human dream, to be transformed, to transcend, to discover a spark of immortality in the shadow of mortality. The Golden Dawn had clothed this dream in the language of Solomon, of the seal and the temple, of rituals and elixirs. But there were only one chapter in a far older book. The flame of alchemy burned long before them, in the smoke-filled chambers of Egyptian priests, in the cryptic scrolls of Greek philosophers, in the laboratories of Arab scholars, and in the manuscripts of medieval mystics. Each culture carried the fire, passing it forward like a torch, even as empires crumbled and centuries turned. In Alexandria, seekers of the 2nd century spoke of Hermes Trismegistus, a sage who blended Egyptian, Greek, and mystical thought. His writings, the Hermetica, described a cosmos alive with hidden forces, a universe where matter could be transmuted and the soul could ascend. Centuries later, Arab alchemists like Jabir ibn Hayyan refined chemistry while cloaking it in allegory, speaking of elixirs and transformations that mirrored both laboratory and spirit. Their flame passed into Europe, where monks bent over manuscripts whispered of the philosopher's stone. The Golden Dawn inherited this lineage and wrapped it in their own mythos. For them, alchemy was not merely chemistry or philosophy, but a drama enacted in the human soul. They taught that every person was lead awaiting refinement, every life a furnace where trials and sufferings burned away impurity, revealing gold within. This gold was not wealth, but wisdom, not riches, but eternal youth of the spirit. To endure life's blackening and whitening, to rise again in red brilliance, was to embody the eternal flame. Yet, the dream of alchemy has always been double-edged. For every seeker of wisdom, there has been a dreamer of power. The Golden Dawn's controversies mirrored the same tension. Whether alchemy was a metaphor of the spirit or a literal pursuit of elixirs and dominion, some longed only for enlightenment. Others whispered of potions, of rituals that might halt decay. The flame, always bright, cast both light and shadow. Still, the flame endures because it speaks to something deeper than ambition. It speaks to the universal human longing to outlast time, to touch eternity. We all, in our own ways, seek the philosopher's stone, in science, in art, in faith, in memory. Every attempt to heal, to create, to understand, every poem written, every prayer spoken, every experiment pursued, is a fragment of that alchemical fire. The Golden Dawn was but one vessel for it. When they crumbled, the flame leapt elsewhere, into new orders, new seekers, new dreams. The beauty of this flame lies in its resilience. Empires fall, texts are lost, rituals fade, but the dream remains. It flickers in the pages of Yeats' poetry, in the whispered invocations of secret societies, in the fascination of modern readers drawn to tales of philosophers' stones and elixirs of life. Even science, in its quest to prolong life and unlock the secrets of the cell, echoes alchemy's eternal pursuit. The language has changed, but the flame is the same. Thus, the Golden Dawn, though fallen, played their part in keeping the flame alive. Their rituals, their invocations of Solomon, their whispers of eternal youth, all were sparks added to the fire. And as long as humanity dreams of transformation, as long as we hope to rise renewed from the ashes of time, the flame of alchemy will burn. Traveler, let us linger now on the heart of the flame itself, the longing for immortality, the pursuit of youth unending. For though the Golden Dawn crumbled into rivalries and shadows, the dream they chased was never theirs alone. It is humanity's oldest hunger, an echo found in every culture, in every age, in every story whispered by firelight or carved into stone. Look first to the east, where Taoist sages wandered mountains in search of the elixir of life. They swallowed tinctures of cinnabar, jade, and mercury, believing these minerals carried heavenly essence. Some legends tell of sages who vanished into forests, returning centuries later unchanged, their eyes bright with eternal fire. Whether true or not, the stories endure, proof of humanity's refusal to accept the boundaries of time. Turn then to the west, where Greek myths spoke of ambrosia, the food of the gods, granting immortality to those who tasted it. Heroes sought fountains that could wash away age, just as medieval explorers searched for the fountain of youth said to flow in distant lands. Even in the New World, tales told of waters that restored vigor to the weary. Though no fountain was found, the myth reveals a truth, that people have always believed eternity must lie just beyond the horizon. The Jewish and Islamic traditions, too, wove immortality into their lore. Solomon, wise beyond measure, was said to know the herbs of paradise, the angelic names that healed and preserved life. In Sufi tales, seekers journeyed through deserts for a sip of the water of life, hidden in the darkest places of the world. These were not merely stories of flesh, but allegories of spirit, to be made eternal not by body alone, but by awakening the divine spark within. The Golden Dawn inherited all these myths and reframed them for a modern age. In their chambers, immortality was both symbol and possibility. The elixir they sought was not only tinctures in chalices, but the transformation enacted through ritual. Each initiation, each symbolic death and rebirth, was a rehearsal for eternity. To step out of the temple renewed was to taste youth of the soul, even as the body aged. And yet, the whispers of literal elixirs remained, a reminder that the longing for unaging flesh is too deep to dismiss. Science, too, has joined this pursuit. In laboratories, researchers speak of genetic repair, of unlocking the secrets of the cell, of reversing the damage of time. Though couched in modern language, it is the same fire the alchemists chased. Where they spoke of philosophers' stones, we speak of stem cells and DNA. Where they dreamt of elixirs, we dream of medicine that halts aging. The vessel changes, but the flame endures. Why does this longing persist? Because death is the great silence, and age its herald. To seek immortality is not folly, but the most human act of all, the refusal to accept that life's beauty must end. Whether through prayer, potion, poetry, or science, we reach for something beyond the veil, something that promises renewal. And in reaching, we keep the flame alive. The Golden Dawn understood this. For all their controversies, their failures, their rivalries, they carried the flame of humanity's oldest dream. Their rituals reminded initiates that even if the flesh must fade, the spirit could be reborn, youthful forever in the realm of the eternal. In this, they touched the same truth whispered by sages, sung by poets, and sought by scientists, that immortality, whether literal or symbolic, is the eternal quest that defines us. And so, traveler, as you drift deeper into night, remember this. The Golden Dawn was not alone. They were one spark in a fire that burns across millennia. The pursuit of eternal youth is not their story alone, but the story of us all. Traveler, we have journeyed far together, through Solomon's temple, the Golden Dawn's rituals, their controversies, their decline, and the eternal flame of alchemy that flickers in every age. Now, as we step into the final chapter, let us listen for the faintest sound, the whisper of eternal dawn. For even when orders collapse and temples crumble, the echo of their vision lingers, drifting beyond the veil of time like a hymn that cannot die. What is this whisper? It is the sense that all of history's great mysteries are connected, that symbols carved in stone or spoken in secret rituals still resonate in our lives today. The seal of Solomon, once drawn in candlelit chambers, is etched in the imaginations of seekers who have never heard of the Golden Dawn. The dream of eternal youth, once poured into chalices of alchemists, is carried in laboratories where scientists work late into the Ichioi night. The whisper is not confined to one order, one era, or one name. It is universal, timeless, eternal. For the Golden Dawn, this whisper was the belief that transformation is always possible. To pass through symbolic death and emerge reborn was not just a ritual. It was a promise that even in our darkest hours, a new dawn waits. Their temples may be silent, their lodges scattered, but this promise did not fade. Each initiate who tasted that renewal carried it forward, whispering it to others in poems, in teachings, in quiet acts of faith. The whisper also carries humility. The Golden Dawn dreamed of immortality, but they too grew old. They too fell into quarrels. They too dissolved into history. Yet this does not erase their light. It deepens it. For their story reminds us that the pursuit of eternity is not about escaping human frailty, but embracing it, transmuting weakness into strength, error into wisdom, endings into beginnings. Eternity is not a denial of mortality, but a reimagining of it. As a Muslim reflection, traveler, this whisper aligns with what we are taught. That true eternity is not found in potions or rituals, but in the mercy of Allah, who grants everlasting life in the hereafter. The Golden Dawn sought their elixirs and seals, but in Islam, the eternal dawn is promised through faith, patience, and remembrance. The whisper then can be seen not as a rival truth, but as a reminder that humanity has always longed for what only the divine can bestow. Where they sought symbols, we seek the creator of symbols. Where they sought elixirs, we seek the fountain that never runs dry. And yet, we can learn from their striving. For even flawed seekers reflect a fragment of truth, that the soul yearns for renewal, that we are not content to fade quietly into dust. Their whisper was imperfect, but it pointed toward a reality beyond them. In that way, even the Golden Dawn, with all their controversies, played their part in humanity's larger story, the endless search for light beyond shadow. So listen, weary traveler, as you drift into the depths of night. The whisper of eternal dawn is around you still, in the stars that shine after centuries, in the words of poets who dreamed of immortality, in the prayers that rise from hearts seeking forgiveness and hope. It is the same whisper Solomon once heard when building his temple, the same whisper the Golden Dawn sought in their rituals, the same whisper we follow when we raise our eyes heavenward. It tells us, dawn will come again. Not of this world alone, but of the world beyond, where youth does not fade, where time does not decay, where the eternal flame is no longer a metaphor, but a reality. And thus, the story we have followed is not truly theirs, but ours, the story of humanity, forever listening for the whisper of eternal dawn. Traveler, close your eyes and imagine the horizon at its quietest hour, when night still lingers, but the first silver trace of light appears. That moment, fragile yet inevitable, is the essence of the dawn that never dies. For while empires crumble and secret orders fade, the longing they embodied, the search for truth, for renewal, for eternity, remains unbroken. The Golden Dawn, with all its flaws and brilliance, was one vessel with this longing. Their robes are gone, their temples dismantled, their rivalries forgotten by most. Yet their rituals, echoes of Solomon's wisdom, fragments of alchemy, whispers of eternal youth, still breathe in the imagination of seekers. They remind us that the flame of dawn is never extinguished. It only changes form, passing from one generation to the next, like a torch carried across time. This undying dawn can be seen in the resilience of symbols. The seal of Solomon, traced in their rituals, remains a universal sign of harmony and balance. The stories of elixirs and philosophers' stones continue to fascinate, finding new life in novels, films, and even laboratories. The very language of transformation, death and rebirth, darkness into light, lead into gold, still guides us, though we no longer stand in candlelit lodges. What endures is not the structure of the Golden Dawn, but the archetype of dawn itself, a promise that renewal always follows shadow. But the dawn that never dies is not only cultural, it is spiritual. In Islam, as in many faiths, dawn carries sacred meaning. The Quran speaks of the morning light as a sign of divine mercy, of a creation constantly renewed. Fajr prayer, performed at dawn, embodies this truth, that every day is a new chance, every sunrise a reminder of eternity. Where the Golden Dawn sought immortality in symbols and rituals, the believer finds it in surrender to the one who commands both night and day. Their whisper of dawn was fragile. Allah's promise of dawn is eternal. Even so, we can see their yearning as part of the same human tapestry. The Golden Dawn's pursuit of eternal youth though flawed, reflects humanity's refusal to surrender to decay without seeking meaning. Their rituals may not have granted immortality, but they expressed a truth we all feel, that the soul is not content with endings, that it seeks continuity. And in that yearning, they became part of a universal story. The story of humanity searching for a dawn that outlasts death. Traveler, remember too that the dawn is not found only in temples or texts. It lives in the smallest of moments. A word of kindness spoken when all seems dark. A prayer whispered at night. A hope carried through suffering. These are the true rituals of eternity. The living alchemy that transforms the ordinary into the everlasting. The golden dawn dressed it in symbols of Solomon and alchemy, but we can find it in the quiet turning of our own hearts toward the eternal. So as you rest, hear this truth. The dawn that never dies is not theirs alone, nor is it bound to orders, rituals, or secrets. It is the inheritance of all humanity. It is in the rising of the sun, in the remembrance of God, in the promise that death is not the end. It is in the eternal mercy that waits for us beyond the veil. Thus, the Golden Dawn's legacy, though marked by shadows, contributes to this greater truth, that the search for eternity cannot be silenced. The order has passed into history, but the dawn continues. For you, for me, for all who look toward the horizon with hope. And so, weary traveler, as your eyelids grow heavy, let the whisper guide you. The dawn never dies. Traveler, we have wandered long together, through candlelit halls and forgotten manuscripts, through the rise and fall of secret orders, through symbols of Solomon and the flames of alchemy. Now we arrive at the final horizon, the closing reflections of this journey. It is here, at the edge of night, that the meaning of the Golden Dawn story unfolds in quiet clarity. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn promised much. Hidden wisdom, eternal youth, communion with angels, mastery over the forces of nature. Its members dreamed of Solomon's lost texts, of elixirs that could defy age, of rituals that could unveil eternity. And yet, as we have seen, they were undone by human frailty, rivalry, ambition, secrecy, and pride. Their lodges collapsed, their secrets spilled, their unity shattered. In worldly terms, their story ended in twilight. But endings, traveler, are never the whole tale. For though the Golden Dawn failed as an institution, its vision still resonates. The hunger that drove them, the longing for transformation, the refusal to accept the finality of death, is not theirs alone. It belongs to all humanity. The Golden Dawn was not the source of this longing, only one vessel. The true source lies in the human soul itself, which has always strained against the chains of time. Here then is the paradox. The Golden Dawn's failure is also its triumph. By reaching beyond themselves, even imperfectly, they kept alive the whisper that eternity is near. Their rituals, their myths of Solomon, their pursuit of light in shadow, these were flawed expressions of a truth too vast for any order to contain. But even flawed expressions carry power, like broken mirrors, still catching fragments of the sun. As Muslims, we can see their story with both caution and insight. Their hunger for eternal life mirrors a truth we hold dear, that humanity was not made for oblivion. Yet their error was in seeking eternity through symbols and secret rites, rather than through the creator of time himself. True eternal dawn is not brewed in chalices or bound in grimoires. It is granted by Allah, who promises a resurrection where age does not touch and youth never fades. What they sought in shadow we are promised in light, and still we can learn from their striving. The Golden Dawn reminds us that the search for meaning is universal. Whether in a temple, a laboratory, or a prayer mat at dawn, the human heart longs to be transformed. Their downfall warns us of pride, but their yearning teaches us humility, that even when we stumble, the search itself brings us closer to truth. So as we close, let us reflect not only on their story, but on ours. We, too, walk between shadow and light, between mortality and eternity. We, too, listen for the whisper of dawn, whether in ritual, in scripture, or in the rising of the sun. And like them, we, too, seek to be made new. Traveler, may you carry this whisper with you as you drift into sleep, that every night, however long, ends with morning, that every fall is followed by renewal, that beyond the veil of time, there waits an eternal dawn where the soul is young forever. Thus ends the story of Solomon's alchemists, of the Golden Dawn and their pursuit of youth eternal. But the greater story, the story of humanity listening for eternity, continues, and you are part of it. So close your eyes, breathe deeply, and rest in the promise. The final dawn is not an ending, but the beginning of forever.